Greetings from Costa Rica and welcome to today's Friday broadcast. Steve, what altitude are you joining us from today?
I would say around 350 meters.
350.
Nice and cool.
Absolutely. So, to give you a bit of context, I am broadcasting here from my home at about 28 meters above sea level here just outside of Paraíso, near the coast. Steve is up in the mountains in an absolutely beautiful area called Hojancha, here in this sort of elevated area. Today we're talking about higher altitude living, and really what we want to talk about in bringing Hojancha into the picture today is a lot of the cool things that you can do up in Hojancha that you can't do down in the lower areas here in the coast. Steve has been very connected to the community there for years through his nonprofit work. So anyhow, Steve, today I'd like to start out by asking you, tell us a little bit just in general about the area, Hojancha. If someone's visiting there, what can visitors do up there? Activities that stand out in the Hojancha area up in the mountains?
Well, it's basically nature-based. It's spectacular scenery up here. And well, specifically what people could do is they could visit the Monte Alto Nature Reserve, which was created by the community back in the 1980s and is a real gem as far as protected areas in Costa Rica go, and completely run and created by the community. They can take a very, very high quality coffee tour and enjoy very good coffee. If you want to know how coffee is produced and processed, this is the place. It's a cooperative that's been in business since 1960. And then one thing I love to do, and I live here, is take drives in the country. The roads are surprisingly good. And if you like driving in the country, seeing scenery, this is a great place. It's really a good getaway from the coastal towns. It's close and it's very, very good place and quick and easy to get away from the heat and the dust of the dry season down there.
No, absolutely. I should have started out with some more general information. You know, one of the reasons that we want to talk about higher altitude Guanacaste living is that, yes, if people contact me and they say, well, you know, I don't really want to be in the extreme heat, which is very characteristic of lowland coastal tropical areas, especially here in the dry tropical forest. Steve and the Hojancha area really getting up and out in altitude is the fastest way to find those cooler temperatures. Can you tell us just briefly a little bit about the weather in that area?
Well, it's very similar to the weather in the Central Valley, let's say. If you've ever been to the Central Valley of Costa Rica, it's been described as almost perfect. And it's because of the altitude, basically, and also because this is one of the drier sides of the country.
Mm-hmm.
So our altitude goes from, say, in Hojancha, it goes from sea level. We do have a beach here, which is one of the more lesser known beaches, but extremely nice. And it goes all the way up to almost 1,000 meters. So you can actually be quite cool in the evening, sweater weather, let's say, up here in the higher altitudes. And during the day, depending on your altitude, it's in the 70s, 80s, rarely. It does get into the 90s, but not really in the higher altitudes. So in the center of Hojancha, it's noticeably cooler than it is, say, where Matt is,
Yep.
um, or in the other towns of the bigger cities of Guanacaste, let's say.
Yeah, up there you can see how quickly, like you said, you can really choose your altitude earlier, and you can look at the Hojancha area being sort of 400 meters above sea level, but then quickly, yeah, if you race up a mountainside, then you're up at 1,000 meters quickly. Steve and I have driven around up in those, ridge areas, and they're just some of the most scenic spots looking over the entire Guanacaste Peninsula. Out in one direction, you can see the Golfo de Nicoya. In the other direction, you can see the Pacific Ocean, or out to these beaches down here. I mean, it's just the views are incredible. I wanted to quickly show, so this is the Canton de Hojancha on Wikipedia. Thank you very much to wikipedia.org for their contribution to today's broadcast. You can see, so Hojancha does have a narrow outlet here at the coast at the beach known as Playa Carrillo, which is a really cool, special spot. I want to, by comparison, show the Canton de Santa Cruz. Really, I was telling Steve, this is sort of my entire service area. The beaches that where I help clients are all in the Canton de Santa Cruz, from Potrero up here in the north, really down to Marbella, and yes, sort of down to Ostional, but basically my area of service is defined by this county, or the Canton de Santa Cruz. And you can see by contrast, the Canton de Hojancha has a very different shape. And in fact, it includes a lot of these higher mountainous areas and very little of the coast. I'll go back down here so that people.
Right.
This is
You
Puerto
you
Car-
could right.
Tell us a little bit about the beach, Steve.
Okay. Well, that beautiful Half Moon Bay is Puerto Carrillo. Um, it was a fishing village. It was a place where historically, when the area was being settled, logs were sent out to sea and then towed to sawmills in Punta Arenas. Um, if you look at the shapes of the two counties that Matt mentioned, Ojancha is very mountain heavy, let's say, and very whereas Santa Cruz has a huge coastline, and that I think has also historical reasons. That people that settled Ojancha weren't interested in the beach. They were interested in raising cattle and farming, growing coffee, and those were activities that were actually um, better suited for higher altitudes, and so that's kind of why it has that shape. I think when they created the county, they figured that Ojancha really did have to have a beach after all, so they had that little corridor out to the beach, and fortunately they included one of the more beautiful beaches as
I
Ojancha. So
and I'm sorry I don't have a clip prepared. It's a place where they've set up sort of a boulevard where really they've created just this perfect sort of park for everybody to enjoy the beach. It's kind of, a lot of areas here, you people imagine themselves driving down coastal roads and seeing beaches or passing through these areas. And up here, that rarely happens. You're driving sort of inland from the water. You pass through Carrillo, and it's just sort of absolutely this little slice of perfection where you just want to pull over, get out your beach blanket, spend a day, and relax. So I wanted to go back. You mentioned that Ojancha's been, it's clearly still an agricultural area. What are some of the things that people are still producing up there? And if I, wanted to support the families who are producing up there, what can I do?
well, one is coffee. Guanacaste um, has a reputation for not being a coffee producing part of the country, but growers in Hojancha are proving that they can grow very, very high quality coffee that has won prizes. And I think taking the coffee tour and buying the coffee on offer at the cooperative would be one way to do that.
Excellent.
Is to support them for sure. Look for it in your supermarkets or um, it's becoming better known and more widely distributed. I think even in the airport, there's a coffee called Blue Zone Coffee, which is grown up in this area.
Okay.
Um,
Excellent.
Another thing is that has, and this is much more recent, is that Orange has become a citrus hub. There's a great deal of citrus, mostly oranges, that are being grown here. And so a lot of the fresh juice that's sold in the country is produced here in Ojancha. One thing that the cooperative is doing is that they're trying to work very closely with hotels and restaurants along the coast so that the agricultural products produced here in the country find a market here in Guanacaste along the coast.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always, I remember when I was working with the Honey Project, a little bit of
Right.
background. Steve and me, we originally got to know each other while he was directing the Guanacaste Community Fund and giving small grants to organizations like my struggling nonprofit, which at the time, the Watershed organization. And we were delivering honey personally in the back of my 1990 Pathfinder from producers here in La Florida out to the JW Marriott, which was one of the first places where they actually committed to buying all of our honey at a really decent price. It wasn't sort of the bulk barrel price. They actually were totally willing to deal with the complete fluctuation in the flavor in the honey as well. So I have to say, like, um, we were really impressed that the chef there just said, "Yeah, I want to buy from you guys." And I'd be taking them 40, 50 kilos of honey at a time, all bottled up and basically just straight from the producer out to that hotel.
Well,
People do,
it's a huge selling point
yeah,
for restaurants and hotels to say that they're using local products. It's farm to
yeah.
table, and so there is a market for fruits and vegetables and chickens and eggs and honey,
Say,
cheese made here.
is there do the Ohancha producers, when is there farmers market that people could go and buy directly from them?
Well, they don't really have one. They have one on Friday, but it's not what you would expect. I think that um, it hasn't. One thing that has happened in La Hancha is that over the years, it's become much more focused on commodities that are sold in bulk to markets nationwide and overseas, whereas before every farmer was much more self-sufficient, and that's when there was a lot of bartering and community um, back and forth of people sharing what they grew, and there was a farmers market. And right now, unfortunately, it's become much more focused on cash crops that are sent to other parts of the country and overseas even. And
Yeah.
that includes beef, it includes the citrus and the oranges, it includes the coffee. But that's beginning to change. I mentioned, the farm to table and finding markets for things that can be grown here. With the pandemic, one of the good things that happened with the pandemic was that people began to think a lot more about growing what they eat.
Yeah.
Um, and so that brought about a change, and people have planted a lot more of things that they can basically rely on for their own diet and for their neighbors, and also that's beginning to see that there's a market for these things along the coast as well.
Yeah, I've especially with food prices what they are, I see, there's so many people in Guanacaste still with absolute connection. Lots of them have farms, lots of them have really strong skills and knowledge in growing their own food anyhow. It's more just, now that people are seeing that need and the pandemic pushing them to see it, to a greater degree, uh, it's definitely um, positive to see people diversifying. I was going to ask, so the where could somebody buy some of this citrus if they really wanted to? Is there a stand at the bottom of the hill from Hojancha out on the main highway, or even there it'd be impossible to find their citrus?
It's yeah, the citrus is basically handled commercially and sold in retail and in supermarkets and things like that. One thing that is happening that's really great, and I think this happened again because of the pandemic, is that people began um, cooking more traditional foods and selling them out of their home. Ohancha is a very tight knit community, and everybody knows each other. And so people would either make cakes or they'd make pastries or
Yeah.
they'd cook whole meals, and then just through Facebook and WhatsApp they would sell it to their neighbors, and that's become quite a I don't a micro industry here,
Well, yeah.
and I think a lot of people have and the food's much better than you would find at most places
Oh,
that
totally.
sell prepared food, and so that's a great thing that's happened.
I was gonna say one of the easiest ways that everybody can support Costa Rican families, as if you're visiting the country, drive through, and yes, you can stop at what looks to be the smallest, restaurant with only one table that's basically a shingle hung up on somebody's home. A lot of times you're gonna have an incredible experience. The food is going to be amazing. You'll get the opportunity to try a lot of things. You know, I was uh, I was speaking to somebody about mondongo and some of these, really plates that you can try, but absolutely that will really enrich your experience. Those and those families are absolutely going to benefit from you stopping and giving your tourism dollars directly to them into their pockets versus giving your tourism dollar to a multinational conglomerate who eventually pays them a measly salary to work. So anyhow, Ohio is
Yes, yes.
driving through the community. You can feel there's dozens of these small family businesses that people could support, including those private nature reserves. Like we were pointing out Monte Alto earlier. Um, you know, I think it was I'm so jealous of this whole area because they, did smart land use planning to, basically rope off their water source and, preserve the green areas where they're getting aquifer recharge. You can go up there and do hikes. You can learn all about the community project and, basically support rural community resource protection directly by making sure that the guides and all of those folks are getting some money.
Well, yeah, Monte Alto is like I said before, it's an extremely special place. It's some of the best hiking um, around. Very good birding as well. And the history is just really interesting because there was a very severe drought around 1980, and the Rio Nosara, which is a major waterway in this part of the country, dried up completely, and a lot of the cattle, which people depended on, died, and people left the community, and so they got organized, and they decided that what they had to do was reforest the upper part of the watershed of the Rio Nosara, and they did that. They A lot of people donated part of their land. They raised money. People that had salaries committed to donating part of that to the project, and now it's a gorgeous reserve, and it's also a symbol to community of it's very important to the community because it was a community effort, and it saved the community really at that time. And so it's a symbol of basically how the community works together, and that's very typical of this area,
Yeah.
is that people do work together very closely.
No,
And one way that's evident is that it's one of the safest communities in all of Costa Rica, and it's recognized as such.
for sure.
And that's because people look after each other.
Yeah, it's a very tight-knit place, and nothing leads to, security more than people knowing everybody's business all day long. If you are interested about these high altitude areas, Steve is available at steve@cbpacificrealty.com. También, si a usted le interesa consejos, cualquier información que Steve le puede brindar. Obviamente, él es hispanoparlante por tener tantísimos años aquí en Costa Rica. El más bien
35.
35, sí, tantísimos años, pero se ve jovencito aún todavía. Feel free to email Steve.
Yes.
We'll be talking more about Hojancha, these cooler climate areas. Obviously, Steve is going to be looking around in the community for different opportunities, farms, properties, homes, different things for sale. Really appreciate you joining us to talk about Hojancha, an absolutely lovely spot and one of the places people should put on their, rural tourism radar at a minimum. Thanks very much for joining us, Steve.